2 for 1?
As in just value, you know, this whole notion of having value, something having value.
Depends what you mean by that. All experience has the same value. And all experience is inconceivably valuable, arguably completely valueless, meaningless. So it really just depends on how you want to spin it.
Yes. Oh, well, that's very, very helpful. Just right there. Very valuable.
And the price is right.
Yeah.
So it's valuable in that sense too.
Valuable on many levels. No, because I suppose I was thinking about it in terms of, you know, the notion of attraction and things being valuable in the sense that there is something to get, and just wanting to sort of look at that a little.
Well, this gets into karma. I mean, the nature of the way your experience is biased. I mean, the actuality of your experience is there's an infinity of unpatterned patterning appearing, which is all essentially the same thing. So it's all of the same value. But on the other hand, karmically, your consciousness will probably have a tendency to bias it, where certain things are more interesting, certain things are less interesting, certain things seem to be, more attractive, certain things less attractive, and so on and so forth.
Yeah.
So in that sense, you participate with the patterning in accordance with that, inbuilt bias of however your inherent karmic value seems to be at that, at that point in your arc. But it's not, so value is subjective in that sense, it's very personal, but ultimately the only place value shows up as degrees of value, more or less valuable, is in the context of personal bias, because ultimately it's all exactly the same. All experience is made of one thing, it's made of experience itself, what I call radiant presence. And that being the case, since it may all appear different, but it's all essentially the same thing, so it's all essentially the same value. Like all gold jewelry is made of gold, so it's all the same intrinsic value, but you may prefer the shape of some gold jewelry to other gold jewelry, and that's a personal karma.
Yeah. And that's all showing up spontaneously anyway.
Of course.
So, it's a moot point to really have a discussion about, what works for me and what doesn't work for someone else in a way, because it's also arbitrary.
Yeah, it's arbitrary. It's arbitrary in the sense that it's personal. And it's also ultimately arbitrary in the sense that what you find valuable, if you look very closely at what's actually there, you'll discover that the actual experience is in a vast range that exceeds the qualities that you find valuable or not.
Yes.
So you find something valuable, but also have aspects that you do not value, and vice versa. So if you look very closely at experience, it tends to self-equalize, even within the karmic context, because of the incredible breadth of experiential qualities that are explicit in any experience.
So you're saying that, like, let's say if I go out and I enjoy a night out drinking, there's enough things that I don't like about it, like the hangover and all the other things, that even in any one particular experience that I seem to favor, there's enough variation to where it balances out.
Well, but that's looking at it very, very generalized and very coarsely. If you're looking at it more precisely, even in the hangover, there's what you're calling hangover is an infinitely rich experiential presence, which has, so you can't, calling it a hangover and designating it as a single thing is done conceptually. Because the actual experience is this smear of myriad qualities, some of which are actually enjoyable and some of which are not enjoyable, and so on and so forth. And the same with the night of drinking. So any experience whatsoever is infinitely complex. Let's say, just in terms of the information density, if you like. So it's not coherent. It's not a single thing where it's good or it's bad. You like it or you don't like it. If you look closely at what's actually present, what the experience actually consists of, you discover an infinite, a bottomless richness of divergent experiential flavors, experiential characteristics. So to sum it up, just to oversimplify, to say, oh, it's good, it's not good, I like it, I don't like it, which yet we do just as a shorthand in a matter of convenience. But if you look closely at the experience itself, you'll discover this richness, and you'll discover that which is why karma dissolves when you look closely at experience, because all of the differences are made out of generalizations, and the actuality of experience is not made of generalizations; it's made of specifics, and the specifics are always an infinite smear, an infinite richness of difference. So you can't get a handle on exactly how any one thing is. Even though at first glance it may seem to be predominantly a certain way, if you look very closely at what's there, you'll notice this richness and this divergence.
So even if I'm finding something unpleasant, that's only because I'm not looking at it closely enough.
Well, not necessarily. You may find it unpleasant, but the thing itself is much more than what you're finding unpleasant about it, and the unpleasantness itself is much more than just finding it unpleasant. So in other words, you find it unpleasant, but even the finding unpleasant is more than just finding unpleasant. So here's something I don't like and I find it unpleasant. That's a vast oversimplification on every step of that way of breaking it down. The thing itself is infinitely complex and subtle. The finding, how you find it, is infinitely complex and subtle. And that it's unpleasant, what you mean by unpleasant, is infinitely complex and subtle.
Well, then there's nothing to say.
Works for me.
So, Peter, positive and negative evaluations, like there's to make an evaluation is to identify something as being something,
Yes.
in relation to a sense of oneself as being something.
Well, maybe with regard to a sense of oneself, or maybe not, whatever. But anyway, it certainly involves holding something to be a certain way, and then assessing what that way you're holding it to be means.
Yeah. So the
which always involves, as we were talking about, always involves generalization and oversimplification of the actual experiential richness.
Yeah. So I noticed myself making some sort of evaluation that is at the root or at the root of some sort of response that's happening.
Sure.
Right. And so so it's like the quickest yogic route, or the most effective one, is to notice all of the partializations, right? It's not in contrast to try to open up and embrace and to have faith that one can withstand or can deal with this foreign thing that seems negative.
The direct yogic way of dealing with it is to see that the thing itself is in the specifics of the experience, the actual experiential presence is an infinite richness. And then the partializations and all that, just forget about them. They're invalidated in that seeing. You don't need to deal with partializations because they're fantasies, so who cares?
Well, there's like so in my experience, it's like it's like I'll like for example, I'm talking to someone and I notice some sort of emotional response come up, right?
Uh-huh.
And some sort of difficult emotional response, and I feel sort of internally formed. And so like there's an impulse there to deal with what seems to be arising at this gross level, at that level,
Right.
right? But your suggestion is like that the best thing to do in that situation is just to notice the subtlety, or
Yes.
just to
Yeah, because it doesn't matter what you do. Deal with it any way you want. Deal with it, of course, all you want. Who cares? It's not, yoga is not about what you do or don't do. Yoga is about what it is. And so the thing is to see what it is. And then do with it as you please. You can try and dismantle your do-ness or criticize it or be with it more subtly or this or that or the other. But it doesn't matter which course you take. When you see what it is, that levels it all out. So you'll see it's all the same thing. The experience is the same thing. Your response is the same thing. How you handle it one way or another is the same thing. So the whole thing is just a wash of radiance, naturally.
So in your experience, you talked about not being startled, right? But don't you?
I was startled the other day.
Well, okay, but don't you? Okay, so you were startled.
I noticed that, yeah.
Right?
It was interesting. I haven't been startled in a long time.
All right. What happened there?
I don't remember.
Oh, okay. Okay, so rarely startled, but are you also like rarely? Are you like?
I am never sick at sea. No, it's not true. I'm always sick at sea. I'm sorry. Little side note.
Are you rarely nervous or disgusted or?
I'm rarely nervous. I'm always disgusted.
But not bothered by being hurt by that disgust.
No.
Is there, like, to sort of build on what he was asking, if there is an experience that clearly is eliciting some kind of uncomfortable response versus
Yes.
something that is an enjoyable response,
Yes.
you're saying that they're both exactly the same if you look at it at a subtle, sensitive level.
Yes. If you look at it at a sufficiently subtle, sensitive level.
Sure, but are there any strategies you would recommend to really see that as it is arising?
Yes, develop skill at being able to see it, and the best way to develop that skill is to do it in certain situations where it's relatively neutral, and there's not a strong bias one way or another in terms of attraction or repulsion. Like we talked about before, find an experience that's relatively neutral and irrelevant to you, and that so there's not, you don't have a dog in the fight. There's not much interest in it one way or the other, and in that context, it will be much easier to see what the experience is rather than in a context where you're all torqued up about it and you care about it and there's emotional reactivity and all of that, which just makes it much more complex. It's like studying weather when it's a mild, clear day with a few clouds in the sky rather than studying it, in a hurricane. But if you're good at studying weather, then study it in the hurricane. But, if you're just learning how to do it, you might want to, start slow.
But if I'm like, let's say I'm just looking at a wall and I'm totally neutral.
Yeah.
And
good example.
There's none of that sort of very sharp sensation in the body.
Sure.
Whereas if somebody punches me and then there's all these sensations in the body.
Right.
I'd be hard pressed to say that that situation is exactly the same as if I'm staring at a wall.
It is, but you're hard pressed because you're looking at two different extremes. So you start with staring at the wall and you see what that is actually experientially. And then you graduate slowly to, sitting in a sidewalk cafe and watching people walk by and see what that's like. And you graduate slowly. And eventually, when you develop sufficient skill, even the being punched in the stomach you'll see it the same way. You'll see the what it is. You'll see the actual radiance that it consists of.
Hmm. So you're saying that because those two extremes seem so disparate to me right now,
Yeah.
it's because a certain sufficient level of skill hasn't been developed.
Right.
Okay. Okay.
Initially, when one is dabbling in yoga, the first hurdle is to begin to recognize, oh, this is experience. What is experience itself? What is experience like? What is this experience thing? And you have as you develop more and more sense of what that is, then across the board it becomes clearer and clearer that everything is experience. But but your ability to do that, in particularly in terms of getting caught up in personal reactivity and so on, as we were saying, will probably tend to build up, to seem to build up. But what you recognize anywhere is actually what's true everywhere. There's nothing here but experience. There are no things here. There are no events. There's just experience. And so in a context where you're used to thinking there are things and events, like someone punching you in the stomach, that's like big event, big thing, it matters. There's a whole lot of reactivity there. But it still does experience. There's nothing there but experience. If you dreamed of being punched in the stomach, there would be nothing there but experience. There's no one there. There's no stomach there. And yet you can dream of being punched in the stomach. It's exactly the same if someone punches you in the stomach right here. The only thing that's here is your experience that you're interpreting as being, oh, I'm being punched in the stomach.
And it hurts more.
Maybe not. I might hurt in the dream a lot, who knows? Maybe you're a particularly vivid dreamer, huh? But I mean, the core issue is we're used to relating to our experience not in terms of experience itself, but in terms of what is being experienced. So I'm experiencing roaming, I'm experiencing people sitting in the room, I'm experiencing a conversation. But if I look closely, the only thing I can verify with absolute certainty is present is experience. I can't verify the people, I can't verify the conversation. This may be a dream, in which case there's no people. There's no conversing. It looks that way, but it isn't actually that. Or a hallucination, or just some inconceivable display, whatever. But the fact of experience is undeniable. I mean, what we call experience, that this is present, whatever it is undeniable. So what is the this that is present? We usually think of experience as just a transparent medium through which reality appears in our lives, appear when we interact with things, when we live our lives. But experience is just held to be, yeah, of course it's experience, but that's like saying, for sure I'm looking through a window, of course the window's glass, but I'm looking at what I'm seeing outside the window. But experience is more like a TV than it is like a window. So when you look at experience, the experience itself is what looks like all the events and looks like all the things. And so yoga is all about coming to recognize the presence of experience, and that experience is the only thing here, and then sensitively exploring, well, what is this experience thing? And as you do so, it will become clearer and clearer that there is nothing but experience. And then even situations that provoke an intense investment are seen to be that. And the point is not to not have the investment. I mean, sure, someone punches in your stomach, kick him in the balls. Why not? But the point is not what you do. The point is to see what it is.
So experience itself can't be seen
It can
by
be
the
seen.
five senses.
Yes, you're seeing nothing but. Of course it can be seen.
Well, okay, let me put it a different way. The experience appears to be a bunch of separate objects.
You may be thinking, you may be interpreting it as being that.
I guess what I'm trying to correlate it with is like the Sufi and these type of teachings that say when your heart is pure, then you can see the whole thing as it truly is, or like the reality can only be seen through the heart, not through the five senses. Is there any kind of like
That's a lot of metaphor in poetry. I mean, it's all very nice, but what exactly do they mean by the heart? But, you know, it's metaphor. You know, they're not talking about this lump of flesh here somehow sees where these don't.
Well, Ramana Maharshi talked about the right part of the heart at the heart center through which.
I never understood what he was talking about. The heart's not here, it's here.
What was that?
He's got a lot of his followers held up there, right?
Yeah.
No, I mean, whatever. But the point is not about the heart, it's about experience. The heart exists because of experience. Heart appears, the whole idea of heart exists solely because experience appears. And because experience appears, you have a lot of elaborate patterning appearing, which you're able to interpret as involving things like hearts and things like seeing. But all of those abstractions are abstracted from and are conceptual interpretive overlays of this phenomenon that is present.
So I guess what I'm trying to figure out is how do I get beyond this conceptual overlay of the five senses to see experience, which is everything and everywhere, so you can't really see it?
Well, you said it yourself, you know, start with a blank wall, start with a clear blue sky. Look at the wall, and you think you're looking at a wall at first, but after a while, it looks like you're looking at a light show. So you begin to see the way in which the wall, you know, typically, because of the heavy-handed censorship of mind and interpretation, you look at a wall, you see this inert thing sitting there, it's like it's a wall. But if you attend carefully to the actual experience of it, you'll notice it's shifting and breathing and moving, and with patterns of lights and colors and flickerings and all sorts of things. And you'll discover that the stability that you're used to seeing it as consisting of is a heavy sort of a hypnotic overlay over the actual experience, which is continually changing, fluid, morphing. I mean, for example, I turn my head and the entire world shifts. I'm used to thinking, no, the world's here, it's stable, it's not moving, it's my head that's moving, but that's not the experience. That's a theory. That's a conceptual overlay over the fact of blur, blur, blur. The blur is the reality. That there is a room which isn't moving is a fantasy that exists in appearing in, you know, in mind, for example.
In one of your lectures, you said that somebody asked you that, like, you know, that what did you do? Did you try prayer? Did you try whatever? And you're like, well, I have kind of a manic personality, so I tried everything. And I feel like to some extent you kind of do have to have like a manic personality to really see it, right?
I don't know, maybe. Maybe just be lucky, or maybe just have the right skill set. But there's no a priori way of knowing what that skill set is. So you can assume you have the skill set and just go for it, and maybe you will. I mean, you seem like a pretty manic guy to me. I don't know you that well, but just off the top of my head.
It can be.
Well, he's well qualified.
There's it.
Just worried I'm not manic enough.
You're manic about being manic. That's good. Good sign. Very good sign. Sounds manic. Visually. He's broken through the manic threshold.
I've seen a light.
I'm pretty mellow.
I've noticed that.
I think that's debatable.
Maybe happily not.
My first 3 nights in India was in a place called the Manic Lodge. And it was.
Mm.
You also said that the beneficial effects of yoga are cumulative. Like if you do yoga and you start seeing at a certain level start seeing reality at a certain level, you can't go backwards from it. But then at the same time, you say that reality is completely amorphous and just totally unbounded and uncontrolled. So how is this one thing pretty mechanical?
Well, I also said that it's impossible to say how things are, so all descriptions are inaccurate. So where does that leave us?
He covers his bases there.
Trying to do homework class.
He's a maniac.
I was just listening to this on my walk today.
Yeah, but you memorized it.
Gavin tried that earlier on, but he doesn't take notes anymore.
Isn't that kind of a trap that often can be, one can fall into, where you're just kind of, it's like a hidden agenda of the mind's mechanism to kind of say, oh, I think I've got something, and I heard him say this, and it makes so much sense, so that must be the way, and then it gets ingrained and like conceptualized, and that's the concept.
Yeah.
And then it's a trap.
Yeah.
So it's kind of like.
It's a trap, but it's not.
Entertaining.
It's a trap, but it's not really a trap because you're never actually trapped in anything. Because concepts don't contain anything. Concepts don't contain what you are. What you are contains concepts. So you're never actually trapped by them. You can only believe or imagine you are.
But can it be like a distraction though?
Yeah. It can seem to be very distracting. But experience outside of concepts is always present. So even though you may be distracted from noticing that fact, it's always available. Concepts take up a very small portion of experience. Most experience is non-conceptual. There's no concepts in the field of vision. There's no concepts in the field of hearing, and so on and so forth. All the sense fields are devoid of concept. They're just the naked presence of, and call it energy information, sensory patterning, whatever you want to call it. And then, so that then the conceptual mind, conscious mind, which is a relatively small portion of experience. If experience had a geography, it would be like quite a small country in the terrain. Overlays all these concepts on all of this experience, but it pretends to overlay them because there's no actual overlaying. So conceptually, I can say I'm seeing you, but in the visual field, there's just this presence. And there's no I, and there's no you, and there's nothing. In the visual field, there's just this presence. Even if simultaneously the mind is thinking, oh, I'm seeing you. But that occurs over here in thought, And in the visual presence, there's just naked presence. There's no thought, there's no words.
It's kind of like a shift in focus or shift in like attention. I mean,
Sure. Yeah.
Identification with not identifying with this thing that's going, that I live in a world of concepts, which is pretty difficult in a way because it seems to be the majority of experience.
Yeah, but it's not really. If you look closely, you don't actually live in that world. You live in a world of full of sensory information and mental information, which is non-conceptual, just energy presence or whatever you want to call it. And there's this tiny system that is overlaying concepts over the whole thing. But you're not in it, it's in you. It can be really interesting and valuable to pay attention to focus of attention and notice how variable it is, and how even when the focus of attention is on something, that doesn't actually make it privileged or more important than what the focus of attention is not on, and also doesn't make what your focus of attention is on any more present than what your focus of attention is not on. In other words, just because you happen to be thinking about something doesn't make it that particularly important out of all the other things you can be thinking, or the or what else that's non-thought experience that's also always present.
That difficulty in the beginning, I feel like there's not a lot of practice in a way of shifting that focus from away from the constant thought, like even talking to you right now, there's thoughts. And it's true what you say. It's interesting to like, okay, ooh, I'm catching that and like not paying attention. Because I could just be like, oh, there's something else that's happening in my experience.
Yeah.
And it's like, it's difficult because it keeps going towards the thought.
Yeah, well, yeah, you have a long habit of functioning that way, of orienting that way. But, it's not that hard to notice that there is non-conceptual experience present. And you don't need to actually stop the thoughts. Just notice that the thoughts are over here and the non-conceptual experience is over here. You can do that with sensory information, for example.
As a baby step, reducing the importance put into those thoughts. How do you increase? Does it make sense to increase the importance given to another sense?
Well, importance again is a concept. Just notice presence. It's not a matter of importance, it's a matter of that it's present. The full field of experience is always present, of course. And, so
it's harder to see that if you're giving more importance to the thought. I mean, the emotions that come with it.
Maybe, but I think it's seeable because it's obviously true. Your field of vision is full of light from side to side. Your field of hearing is full of sound always. Your field of touch is full of touch information always, and so on and so forth. Even if you're thinking about something that's very important, you don't stop seeing. Your eyes don't go blank. You don't stop feeling. It's not like your body all of a sudden goes numb, disappears. You may not be noticing it, you may not be attending to it, but in fact it's there, and it's there explicitly.
But you still have to notice it.
Huh?
You still have to notice it.
But even if you don't notice it consciously, you are noticing it experientially. It's like you can talk to someone and be involved in a really heated conversation and still drive a car. You're not actually paying attention to the driving, perhaps, very much. But you obviously are because you're able to drive, for example, or walk. You can have a very heated, whatever, and be walking and you don't fall over. Like your legs turn to jelly and you collapse, I suppose.
I was having
So the portion of you that is attending to everything is the important portion. The portion of you that's consciously aware of things is not the important awareness. The important awareness is the fundamental awareness, the presence of experience. And the focus of attention is your unimportant awareness. That's just the conscious mind, conscious focus. The conscious mind is not powerful and it's not important.
Yeah, it just seems like 95% of the time that's where, if there is importance, it's given to that.
Yeah, maybe so. It may seem that way. And even if that's there,
I mean, obviously breathing, adjusting, everything's happening.
yeah, it is. How's that? And you're not paying attention to it. So what's up with that? So what's doing that? But it's a present engagement. You know, I'm looking at you and I'm concentrating on this conversation relatively. And yet at the same time, I'm seeing, you know, the forest here in my peripheral vision very slightly. The important portion of me is the portion that sees that and also sees the conversation. The unimportant portion of me is the portion that only is attending to the conversation. The inherent intelligence, which is the fundamental, call it the fundamental consciousness of experience, that is doing experience, is what's powerful, is what you really are, and is what is the most intelligent portion of your being, and the comprehensive portion of your being. The conscious portion of your being that you're used to identifying with, perhaps, as being you and your personality and your conscious focus of attention of, oh, I'm thinking about this or I'm thinking about that, is the least important part of your being. So yoga largely consists of the discovery of the inherent intelligence, discovery of the foundational consciousness, which is the consciousness of the presence of experience, which is always inclusive across the whole experiential field and doesn't partialize itself. Even as a conscious focus of attention can seem to be very partialized.
So again, it goes back to just noticing. That's the yoga.
Yeah, yoga is just noticing. And what you're noticing is the presence of experience. And if you notice the presence of experience, you'll notice it's always wall to wall.
Oh, what?
It's always wall to wall. It's always inclusive. It's always comprehensive. It always includes the totality of itself in the instant. Regardless of how distracted you are in the conscious mind, the focus of attention, and this and you know, this, that, and the other.
You know, as I was driving up here, I was listening to some music, and it was beautiful music, and I started harmonizing with it just in the car, and as I was doing that, just it hit me so powerfully how I had absolutely no idea how I was able to do that. And how that was so clearly this intelligence that you were speaking about, that was so utterly beyond conceptualization, like that I could pull that off somehow.
Of course.
And then that little kind of noticing of that, I started noticing all these other capacities that were occurring in that instant of seeing and driving, and everyone I hit, it was exactly the same thing.
Yeah.
That, including thinking, of course.
Yeah.
It was like, so it was just. It reminded me of when we were talking the other day about how we recognize that interpretation is utterly beyond interpretation. You know, it's not, we have no idea how that even occurs. It's like conceptualization is beyond conceptualizing.
Yeah.
And
The conceptualization is a concept.
right.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you know, here I'm forming my mouth intricately to make all these words. I don't know how I'm doing it. I can move my arms. I don't know what muscles I'm using. I can do it effortlessly. You know, I can walk, I can sit, I can keep from falling out of the chair usually. And all these kinds of things. What's doing all that? I'm thinking thoughts and having concepts. What's doing all that? I mean, the inherent intelligence does everything. And it's not even hidden. It's completely blatantly obvious.
That's what I was sensing, is how it was like one little thing that was so obvious that anywhere I looked, it was so obvious there that this is being done by something that's incomprehensible. It's just,
Yeah.
it's completely
It's
obvious.
incomprehensible, but it's explicit,
Right.
it's actual,
Right.
and it's self-verifyingly present and comprehensive.
Mhm.
You know, and it's the same thing that puts all these colors here with all this vividness. It's the same thing that, you know, instantaneously assimilates without lag time the presence of the full sensory fields. You know, when you look at a situation, instantly all the colors are completely present. The mind may play catch up of like, oh, that's a cabinet and this is a sofa with people on it. But in the instant, with zero lag time, bang, it's all completely present. And that is a powerful exercise of intelligence.
Mhm.
You know, consciousness / intelligence, whatever. I mean, trying to
Whatever it is.
naming these things is obviously absurd because they are what they are, and there's no point. You know, they don't conform to any concepts we can go at them.
When Saint Francis of Assisi said that what you're looking for is where you're looking from,
Mhm.
is it helpful to direct attention to sort of what's doing the looking? Is that a good way to sort of get into that all-encompassing space?
It can be, but in my opinion, it's a hard way. Because you look for what's looking and you won't find it right away, and so the tendency will be to free associate something.
Hmm.
Whereas if you look at what you seem to be seeing, you will find something. And so you can look at the something that you find and find out how weird it is. Whereas if you look at what's in your experience, you won't find anything. And you find the same weirdness. But it's hard to get to the bottom of the fact that you're not finding anything.
So you're saying you'll eventually end up conceptualizing something and coming up with a word like awareness and making a concept out of that.
You're liable to. I mean, look right now. I mean, it doesn't take time. Look right now. What's in your experience? How's it being seen? End of story. That's it. So now you've done the yoga.
Well,
real,
how's
you
that,
have.
how's that different from looking at that chair and
It's not. That's the
seeing
point.
how weird that chair is?
That's the point. It's not different.
Okay. As long as you're not trying to form some kind of concept in either direction.
Yeah. And it's easier, in my opinion, to not form a concept on sensory experience.
Hmm.
Because, you know, things like the seer or awareness or trying to look for something like that is so subtle that if you put concepts on it, you won't even notice because there's nothing to compare them against. If you follow that. Whereas if I look at this, say in the visual field, there is this, and so if there's concepts, I can see the concepts, but then the this is quite clearly explicit. So it's kind of an instant. It's like I have a reality check.
Hmm.
So, oh, it's a hand. Well, the hand is a concept, but this is, you know, it doesn't say hand anywhere. You know, oh, it's flesh colored. You know, oh, it's sort of tan. It's like, you know, how many colors do I see? You know, concepts again. Labels. Like, you know, it's like the concepts just can't possibly capture the actuality, no matter how I pile them on. But the actuality is right here and explicit and very clear, whereas the actuality of what's in your experience is equally explicit and clear, but it's an explicit, clear unfindability, which is a category of object we're not generally used to dealing with.
Hmm. That really makes sense. Thanks.
Well, I mean,
as much sense as it can.
Yeah, I mean, I mean, yeah, but I mean, by all means, but try it. I mean, it's a great experiment, you know, and it goes to the distance, but it's also, in my opinion, it's really, you know, it's an edge that's very easy to fall off of, and you can fall off it very subtly and not even realize you've fallen off.
Right. And I think that really that helped me reconcile this thing I've been trying to sort of sit with, which is how does what you're saying differ from the self-inquiry, like what's watching my experience and all. Like,
Ultimately, it doesn't.
Yeah.
It's just a matter of technique. You know, I argue that my technique is easier. But, you know, whatever works. I mean, anywhere you look, you ultimately find the same thing, because there's only one thing here.
Hmm.
But it's a matter of how easy it is to recognize what you're finding and that you're finding it.
I mean, I would say, Peter, that I find it easier, I found it easier over time not to look for focus.
Right.
Just to, I mean, that was usually my default thing, is to try to pinpoint things, but to try and do the opposite of that has been helpful too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Just to the point where when I actually look and see what I'm focusing on, there isn't actually anything there.
Right.
So it's become much easier just to be in that field.
Yeah. I agree, because again, focus is a very artificial and imaginary mode. Most of experience is not what we would call in focus. Most of experience is very fuzzy.
But this whole spiritual concept of focus
Yeah.
been so misleading.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
That, you know, I mean, I was taught to look at a point of light and,
Yeah, yeah.
you know,
Yeah.
you know, it's just like on and on and on.
Yeah.
And just to deactivate or
Yeah.
to decompress from that and
Yeah.
to actually dolly back into what's actually going on.
Yeah. Because presence, which is the true focus, is ubiquitous. It covers everything, the full field.
It's a huge relief, really.
Yeah, it's totally a relief. I mean, what a load off. And then at that point, whatever is in focus or not is just games
Things
the mind's
appear
playing.
and, you know,
Yeah.
they just move through.
Yeah. But everything is fully present. The full field of experience is fully present, and that is the important focus. That's the actual focus.
Yeah. So the focus is on presence as opposed
Yes.
to on anything,
Yes,
or
exactly.
to find some point, or
Yes.
to have some thought, or
Yeah.
whatever.
Yeah, because in the full field, all the points are the same, and so it's arbitrary what point you choose to settle on. Any point is just a specific example of the totality.
Yeah.
kind of feels like daydreaming without really daydreaming. Like the aperture is wide open,
Mm-hmm.
but you're not really focusing on anything.
Sure. But it doesn't exclude focus, but yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, focus may spontaneously appear, and probably will inevitably spontaneously appear, but it's unimportant relative to the full, like you say, the full aperture. I mean, the quality of presence is very interesting. any portion of experience is equally present as any other portion of experience. So I looking at you, so you're in focus, blah, 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 and you're present, but the extreme periphery in my visual field is totally out of focus and barely even there, but it's actually equally present. So the presence is uniform. And the presence is the inherent intelligence, is the basal, is the radical consciousness. Fact of experience, the potency, the power that does and is experience. And then the conscious mind plays its games within that context, within that field, with focus of attention and labeling and so on and so forth. And all these elaborate interpretive frameworks and narratives and so on. But none of that actually adds to or departs from the full field which is present.
Peter, can you speak more of that in relation to death? I think you had mentioned that in the prior lecture where like you said something about you have absolutely no fear of death. Or you've kind of come to a point in your experience where you can see clearly, or I don't want to quote you. Is it really just an importance that the mind gives that causes the fear and this it's like a concept, basically?
Yeah. Fear of death is not fear of death. Fear of death is fear of your fantasy of what death is. Because you can't know what death is. There's no way you can know. So how can you be afraid of it if it's a complete unknown?
And is that kind of I almost feel like you know something we don't, where it's
No, I know what you know. I don't know anything you don't know.
You just don't have a fear in any of it. You don't.
No, it's not that I don't have a fear. It's that I can see that the fear is not fear of death. It's fear of a fantasy, and the fantasy is arbitrary. I can be afraid of the boogeyman. The boogeyman's a fantasy.
So it's no different. Fear of death is no different from fear of the boogeyman.
Not at all.
Just fear.
Not at all. It's a fantasy that you imagine exists and you imagine has certain properties. And if it did exist and if it did have those properties, which you imagine it does, it would be frightening. Don't open the closet, Mommy. The boogeyman's in there. He's going to come out and get me.
I guess I'm confusing it with some kind of like a belief or a reassurance that you may have of like there's still going to be this radiant presence.
Well, there is more. For me, there is more because I can see that this is beyond space and time, and this is beyond event. Event occurs in this. This is not dependent upon event. And dying will certainly be an event in this. So in that case, it won't be any different than any other event.
And you can see that clearly. I mean, that's really...
To me, yes.
True, yeah.
But no worries, it's unimportant. You'll find out for yourself what it's like soon enough. But so here you're on your deathbed, right? You're in the hospital or whatever, and you're about to die. And what's happening? There's experience present, and there's experience present, and there's experience present. Just like right now, there's experience present. Basically, exactly the same. Looks different, but exactly the same. Experience always looks different, but it's always exactly the same thing. Experience never becomes anything else than experience. But it always looks different. It never looks the same way on two occasions. So you're on your deathbed and you're about to die. 2 minutes away, you're going to die. Let's say you don't know that, but in actuality, that's going to be the case. So 2 minutes away, you're going to die. What's happening? Experience. You're experiencing. Maybe you're experiencing pain. Maybe you're experiencing color. Maybe you're, who knows, out of your head on morphine, whatever, but there's experience, some sort of flavor of experience that is present. There's experience present, there's experience present, there's experience present, there's experience present, and all of a sudden you die. It's experience present.
It's just the unknown of like, does the experience continue?
But every instant is the unknown. You don't know what the next second is going to look like. You do not know. If you see that clearly, you'll see the unknown is where you live. The unknown is the only thing you have. You don't know what you're going to be seeing or thinking or feeling in 1 minute. You don't. You know? I mean, we can set a timer right here, you know, like right now, 1 minute from when I snap my fingers exactly, what exactly are your eyes going to be setting on? What exactly are you going to be thinking? What exactly are you going to be feeling? Total unknown, total mystery, total. And not just 1 minute, like now, this very instant right now is already the unknown. Because it changes instantaneously. I mean, no one, who could have predicted this moment would look exactly like this? It's a mystery, it's a total surprise. Every instant you experience is a complete surprise, a complete unknown, a complete mystery, totally unpredictable. Every aspect of it. You know, every aspect. Not just like some things, but the totality of exactly what your experience looks like is entirely mysterious and unpredictable and surprising already. So how can it be more or less that when it's already totally that?
And I mean, the tethering, you know, the experience of departure from something to,
Yeah.
you know, this body or is all just a fantasy anyway.
Yeah, of
And
course.
so the reality that experience continues to experience it's like, who can say what that's like?
Yeah. And that's it. I mean,
Whether we
it's,
have some identity that will suddenly realize like it's not experiencing experience anymore, or, you know, because it's died. It's just kind of weird.
well, yeah, if you know you died, then you didn't die. If you don't know you died, then what?
Yeah.
But you know, but this that is occurring is beyond space and time and is not dependent upon what it looks like. On the contrary, what it looks like is entirely dependent upon it. Now, this that I'm saying to you is not just a claim or a philosophy. You can discover it very directly and self-verifying it for yourself. And if you do so, and then you consider things like death or birth, you'll find what I have found, which is the actual context within which they occur, which is that they are spin doctorings of something that is utterly beyond that is not dependent upon any of that. But again, you know, talking about such things is just like how many angels can dance on the head of a pin. The simple empirical way to approach it is wait and see, you'll find out.
But I see how you're transposing that to every day.
Of course.
You know,
Yeah, it's not any different. It's not any
You
different.
don't have any idea one way or the other.
No.
Things continue to move
Yeah.
somehow.
Yeah, everything is total mystery, total unpredictability, total spontaneity.
Well, death would be like everything else. It would be this.
Of course, death is this. This is this. You know, everything is a spin doctoring of this, and this is beyond all spin doctoring.
So you're saying that this radiant presence that you've realized and appreciated fully that you are is beyond time and space. So
Because time and space occur within it. It does not have time. This exists only now, and now is non-durational. It has no duration whatsoever. So that's beyond time. There's no past or future in the instant. There's only the instant. So that takes care of time. And space, this occurs here. How big is here? Comprehensive. If anything exists, it exists here. So all of space is this. All of time, which is the present instant, is this. And there's no remainder. There's nothing that's omitted from that. And this isn't, again, this is not philosophy or theory. Look for yourself.
I get the time thing, but the space thing is a little bit. What do you mean by space is contained within it. In my
When you see
experience,
the
space
sun-
contains everything else.
Yes, but where do you experience this space that contains everything else? How do you know there's a space? Where do you see it? When you're waving your hand, where are you waving your hand?
Self-evident kind of. Right?
Self-evident in experience. When you see the sky and you see the sun in the sky, where are you seeing it?
In my experience.
Of course. So your experience is where space appears. When you go to sleep at night and space disappears, where are you seeing that? When you start dreaming and a new space appears, where are you seeing that? When the dream ends and you wake up and that space completely disappears, and then the new space appears and there you are lying in your room, where do you see that? So space appears in experience. Experience doesn't appear in space. And space is very flexible.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Well, I mean, so you can see for yourself.
Oh, that's true.
Why don't we take a little break? So we'll be back in about 10 minutes.
I know that you were the fast responder ever. It was just sort of right there after we had talked about it.
Right.
So I just wanted to.
I thought you were asleep.
What?
Yeah.
I thought you were asleep.
All the time. I don't know. Neither both.
All the above.
What's your new schedule like? You're here for how long? You're here for a few weeks?
Maybe already have 3 shows.
What's that? Oh, yeah. We're in Oakland.
Yeah.
Oakland Hills? Nice place.
Well, I have it in my notes.
Are there like shootings around there? Or?
Yeah, just get more
Yeah, a lot of nice places in Oakland, especially at the nice. But you're away from the bar, right? So you have to bus everywhere?
We did go play at the shop.
Janet lost us.
Get together a lot here. What are your plans for while you're here? Just try to spend as much time with Peter as possible.
Somebody,
Why are you living with Peter Star? You think well?
or you hung out with him today?
No, the guy's always like, busy.
Yeah, I'm serious.
This one. Did you talk to him?
She's going to be here. She is in Israel.
That's
Based
not
on
aware of.
Israel.
No, I want to hear him play his.
Oh,
It's nice to have you around.
but then how is she gonna be here in 9 months?
I want to hear him like
Oh, but she gave me the contact of
I guess if you're going to.
I know.
I'm
her
looking for
better.
a school to like support me during the.
Judy knows her better.
Judy is, yeah.
No, but she went through the process.
Oh, nice.
Natural.
Oh, just I thought, I saw, I thought we had talked
Oh, yeah,
about a
I've
friend
heard
of
about
yours
this
that
with
had
blood
Julie.
things.
Like that's.
I hope you're not.
You're like,
But she knows her better, so you can ask her.
like when I
Let's
was
go to the
in
San
Europe,
Andrew
there were these Australians, they
I've heard about
traveling the
my
world for
Is
30
there
years.
also at Huntingford, the library?
I saw a bunch of these people. And so you're kind of like that.
On Kindle, you just add it.
On a constant circuit.
Yeah, did you get to borrow
In the early days.
Never done a library. I've done like,
Well,
serious.
and then I stole a book.
It's so great. Yeah.
I did, I never read
Like all the
I
time.
know, I used to hang out there, it's good. And then I took like Lord of the Rings.
Sometimes like it's usually like 50 or
See that they're gonna like wreck me. So like I never went back and I never went to the library. I
There's
have
like
it.
big posters.
Where it was, it's in 12 years, your penalties with interest.
you're,
$1 million.
But they have all kinds of interesting books.
They do. Magazines.
I know, I love that.
Should we walk over? Maybe, are we open on Saturday?
It's like a 9 to 5 thing. I feel like I need Sometimes I want to drive all the way there. I'm combining it another way. You have to sit in a room. You can't pull it
for a long time, right?
It's much simpler. Nothing left us to forever. I know, but I didn't see you on Friday.
Friday,
But you were really good back in the day.
I know, I went, very first time I did was now it's like.
First time.
Somebody's teaching.
Sorry.
Once a week.
so I think, yeah, so
She can just draw that.
You know for that?
I don't know.
It's like, who's that other Israeli? You should introduce me. Like, who's that? Just go and introduce yourself.
You must have so many cupcakes.
We're meeting now.
We do a lot more ceremony.
You dog sitting? Huh? Was it easy to find?
Yes.
I know somebody who moved near you, Brady?
No.
You did what?
She moved here from Indiana. No, I don't want to say never. I think he had like a room that's for a few months, but it's pretty much I think for a whole year now. It's just like moving from one. It's pretty amazing. They are, he's not paying anything. Oh, but it's kind of a hassle. He always has to move. But also, also what?
It's work.
Very good.
You might take care of it.
Yeah, and so it's interesting, definitely more layered. Sometimes it's more complicated.
He seemed like the most simple guy.
Yeah, no, for him, maybe, but when you're psychologically, it has to be a bit more.
More than dogs or just in general?
Yeah, my hand-eye coordination is not as good. I expect it to be, but. You mean that? I look at the face and I go with it. It doesn't look like.
Yeah.
There's that face, you know, right there.
Dogs are usually just stupid dogs. Yeah, dogs are like, they're always gonna get excited and want you to come out with them, but you will have to walk them. Cats you don't walk.
Yeah.
Cats are, yeah, I know, like a friend of mine has a cat, and whenever we would come to visit him, he would be like, where is he? Where's his name? Is Hugo. Hugo's hiding, you can't see him. But then he went away for a month. A friend of mine had him, and I came to visit. He was like territorial. Complete opposite. He was like,
Oh, yeah.
when his owner wasn't here.
Is it one of those clowns?
And cats are scarier than dogs. Yeah, I don't know if they're beautiful, but
They're beautiful. So beautiful. I would drink it. You never know.
dogs are more consistent, I think.
Are you pretty proficient?
Especially once we came, they're like, okay, we bonded. Very cheap dates, just give them a bone.
Yeah. Low sponsors.
I was taking this girl who had a cat, and it was one of those cats that didn't come out right away, and I think it was like the fourth time.
I would like to be a little more in the country.
And I was into energy healing, so I was like, trying to heal a child to like that.
The emphasis was on, but he's not made a mistake. I just feel the pressure. It was so
came out right away. And
I was in sure.
yeah,
I knew it.
before. And then she was
I
like,
thought I was probably part of that in my life.
Really?
That's why you like all those pirates and stuff.
yeah.
It's all for the women. The cats.
Are you kidding?
Especially it's hard because your violins, they don't make it a solo, they can play an orchestra.
It doesn't really want to get like it, it just wants to get more.
Well, that is the whole.
You just wants to get shit. So do you like Tantra? So is Tantra where you get chicks, right?
Yeah, that's true.
When did you stop
Different
playing?
skill sets, so,
I gotta study that.
You guys spoken
Next
here.
time,
But you can probably still play it quite well.
deep sea.
Is that the ocean thing, right?
Yeah.
Oh,
Oh, yeah.
You were like 6 for the flute.
Probably just a real ladies' man, I think.
The people just love their dog.
Got it out of the system.
Yeah.
You only need to join a commune.
Yes.
Yeah. So you saw the dog singing in the.
Or be
Yeah.
like a traveler.
The Osho Netflix show.
Oh, there's a couple parts in there where it talks about like the wild sex that everyone was having and really loud and that's what the townspeople.
It doesn't sound like that wild, it sounds like more obnoxious, like you're just fucking around everywhere.
Yeah, but John said he never saw that.
Really?
Yeah, the whole time he was there.
Where was John the whole time?
You know how it is. Whatever you, I mean, that's sort of the mind's ability, right?
You got all the
Perception of your,
radius presence.
your view is a certain way, or even you learn about that thing starts appearing everywhere. So I think all these people, basically it was a conservative community that they came into, and they just hated it. And it takes to the tango, they did a lot of things to kind of aggravate it. But so they interviewed a bunch of them, and they all went about they would be obnoxious and loud and just be like, having sex everywhere. But maybe that's because that's what they had in mind, right? They hated them. Maybe they saw once like a glimmer of somebody having sex, and all of a sudden everything is a big deal for them.
Well, they're pretty conservative, pretty stupid. Sometimes people.
Oh, help the poor, all right.
that's the poor. Oh, I thought you meant the other help.
What was it? The Nike guy? Yeah, I know. He's supposedly a liberal. The Nike just got, what's his name? Maybe that's Nike, what's the quarterback? That's a classic. Kaepernick, yeah.
Oh, really? Oh, yeah.
Supposedly they're a liberal. Maybe that's just now and wasn't back then.
Trying to sell shoes. The inner city kids.
Oh, I like Nike.
Yeah, sure.
Oh, really?
It's like one of my favorite Queen songs. It has such a great groove. I remember dancing to that, like, I think I was in middle school.
Oh, how you doing?
Dance party.
So you're here just till Friday and then you're gone?
What's going on? Your parents in this
Yeah. And set up your own sangha, satellite sangha.
I have no desire to do that. Occasionally I connect with someone they want to work with. So I get to do that. Oh, she's amazing. I got a bunch.
Can people still have on the time?
Yeah, oh, did go comfortable. I think we're at state sale about one. I did. I had no idea. And he had like one of his, Elliot or I don't know. But she just like asked. Oh, really? Where I was like, oh, no. And then they charged me. Oh, I haven't seen that.
They had this amazing,
Now they charge you money. Not all from somewhere. No, he's, I like it. He says it's very fun.
We have a truck from the farmer's market.
But I'm not taking out a lot of that whole thing. I don't need.
They've got, the people at the farmer's market give them
no,
food.
but I'm like,
Yeah, more please, sir.
There you go, get in the morning and have tea or off.
And it's cheaper than the
we all got like something to put like,
Yeah.
wait, stretching and, oh, how fun.
Put Peter on.
Yeah, put it.
You know, it goes like that.
Sometimes I can see it, sometimes I just listen to it.
It's actually
I don't know, I don't always, I think it's more of a thing. It's more of a weird thing. Structures. Where it's
pretty low.
I think it's or, you know, I don't not blowing up for, basically people are like.
Right, that's why we're not
There we go. Right?
Not yet. Another is on there.
Every day.
For
yourself,
I mean, a lot of things I really want to set myself up.
Oh, great.
No way.
I really want to get to see how before she died.
I'm happy.
I know my cousin just died in New York. I want to
And I do have people who, you know, in the shop is
So it's,
selling.
you're not,
They're selling
you should be.
pictures and they're like.
You guys do it all on song or do you?
And it's very good for selling. like take that picture and it's like, such a because it does become a whole, you know, they come with for there, they come every week. They sort of they don't necessarily.
Picks up that website and she draws it.
Yeah.
That's right, you mix the love with love, and you make the music sound
That's awesome.
Where did you guys do
She
that?
does every Monday.
People, you can gamble on who will win the game, by how much.
Just about every Monday she's doing and
Is that you ringing the bell?
It was.
He's good. He comes with a bell. Good sign.
He's new. He'll learn anarchy eventually.
we're gonna run away because we're going to party.
Okay, no more chai. He wants to leave.
Good.
Is there any benefit to having concerted periods of doing meditation or yoga, like where you're not distracted by work and basically, is there any benefit to vigil?
There is always benefit to vigilance. You have to be vigilant about vigilance to not let it sink into a procedural rut.
But there may be some validity to taking some chunk of life to sort of go a little bit deeper.
Sure, why not? But you have to be very careful not to let it become rote or let it become too systematized.
I see.
You have to get out of your own normalcy and head out of the normalcy of the last moment, and more particularly notice that you're spontaneously getting out of your normalcy every instant, because there is no normalcy.
So let's say I took like 2 days in silence in the woods somewhere, and instead of like doing some kind of like rote meditation where I'm doing the same chant and focusing on my breathing, like mix it up to where the curiosity is still fresh.
Yeah, mix it up. And if you're being silent for 2 days, take a period, sometime in one of the days where you stand up and start yelling, for example.
Okay.
Or reciting stupid poetry or anything, just to get out of your own idea that you're doing something. If you're doing action oriented to your idea of what you're doing, then you're liable to be numb with regard to what the action actually is, and you're liable to be subtly seduced by what you're thinking that you're doing, what you're thinking it's being. This is why I recommend generally not practices, but just spontaneity, just hang out.
Is that what they mean when they say like the most important part of meditation is to drop the meditator? Like,
Well, drop the meditator, yeah, but drop the meditation. The most important part of meditation is to drop the meditation. If you're meditating, you're not really meditating, you're pretending you're meditating. Real meditation isn't meditation anymore, because if it was meditation, you're being really conceptually. Real meditation is mystery. You don't know what it is. And since that's already what's happening, you don't need to start meditating in order to notice the mystery. The mystery's right here already.
But it looks so cool when I'm sitting there with my eyes closed.
Well, looking cool is fun.
Well, it does seem to help though with the, like when I meditate, it helps me have a calmer day, but that doesn't have anything to do with yoga, is what you're saying.
Yes. Calmness is lovely, but it has nothing to do with yoga. Calmness is great, by all means be calm. The calmness in itself will not give you realization. Seeing what calmness actually is will give you realization, just like seeing what agitation actually is will give you realization.
It seems to me, my experience is that why do you leave that on the ground?
Yeah.
Is to see what is easier if you're calm than if you're agitated.
Yes.
So in that respect, meditation or something that induces calm can be beneficial. It's not necessarily that.
Yes. Yes. I would say rather than referring it to calmness, I would refer it to sensitivity and intelligence of engagement.
That's to me that's what calmness is.
Yeah, well, maybe so. But calmness is liable to be interpreted as some opposite of thought or opposite of activity, whereas sensitivity of intelligent engagement can occur in any context.
It's actually, for me, it's sensitivity of here now.
Yes, here now. Well, because that's where intelligent engagement is always here now.
That's where intelligent engagement is.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
But when I'm agitated and angry or upset, I find it very difficult to be who I am.
Yeah, that can be the case, but it's because of distraction. Again, the important engagement, the important sensitivity is the engagement that's already spontaneously occurring, not the engagement you do or don't do, or succeed in doing or fail to do. And noticing that engagement, it's important to notice that engagement and to do that in any context where it's easy to do that, or available to do that, which may seem to be calmness, absolutely. But it's not. But the calmness in itself is not important. It's the noticing. It's the noticing the presence of experience itself as the sole action.
And being aggravated or upset or whatever it is also shows me who I am.
Yes, of course.
And in a way that being calm doesn't necessarily. So it's a double-edged.
Yeah, calmness is dangerous because you're liable to think of it as a preferred state or a superior condition, and it may be. You know, if you're stressed and you want to be de-stressed, then have at it. But in terms of reality, there's no bias. Reality is the reality of experience, which includes anything. But seeing that, the important thing is to see that, and so experiment and find any way by hook or by crook that enables you to see that and take advantage of that. But then the seeing that it is what matters, not the context within which the seeing occurred.
Because when I get really calm, I fall asleep.
Of course.
And falling asleep is a very good way of seeing.
Yeah, it can be.
It's the best.
Yeah, it can be. Yeah, the transitional states are excellent. Going to sleep, waking up, starting dreaming, ending dreaming.
I had another experience just recently, which was I was having what turned out to be a lucid dream, but I didn't recognize it as a lucid dream because I wasn't dreaming about concepts. I was dreaming about something that was beyond words. And it was very interesting to me to actually be able to see that process going on. That there was quite often when I wake up, Irma would say to me, "What did you dream about last night?" And I don't remember. But this one I remember, and it wasn't about anything. It wasn't about emotion, it wasn't about visions or images, or it was just about something was going on in my head and there was no concept attached to it.
Yeah.
I found that really interesting.
Yeah.
It seemed like I was seeing into a really deep space.
Mm.
And it was beyond words. It was really interesting.
So, reaction or no reaction, that's not important, yogically speaking, and it's not important to, nor useful to look for like the source or the root of reaction.
Right.
Yeah.
To sum it up, it doesn't matter what you do or don't do. And the important thing is to see what it is. And paradoxically, if doing or not doing certain things facilitates you seeing what it is, then that's great.
Yeah, it's like for me, I guess there's this assumption that like if I get to the root of the reaction, I'm able to stop that, then I have a certain amount of freedom or more space, and that's a better thing.
No.
Yeah.
There's no better thing, and you always have the same amount of freedom and space.
This thing about taming the mind that you see in different, like Buddhist tradition, that's what is it like? How would you talk about that?
I would talk about it by saying forget about it.
Oh, okay.
If you want to hear someone talk about it by recommending it, you need to ask someone who would recommend it.
But you would talk about that in terms of maturation, wouldn't you? No.
I'm not sure what you're saying.
I think you sometimes talk about maturity or maturation, or but there's like a buying into or focus on or a valuation of importance to these fantasies or
Right.
Right, and
Sure.
and that's not a distraction.
It's not it's not a distraction, it's not anything. The point is see what it is. It doesn't matter, like I said, it doesn't matter what you do. The important thing is to see what it is. So buy into fantasies all you want, be totally lost in fantasy, but see what it is.
Yeah,
In other words, when I say what it is, what is actually present when whatever you're calling whatever the occurrence is occurring? What's actually present? So when you're lost in fantasy, what's actually present?
this it is.
Yeah, yes it is.
Experience.
Yeah. But to see that precisely rather than simply have that as a designator.
Well, is it like there are two different actions that go on? Like there's
Yeah, it kind of is.
Yeah.
Sure. There's the presence of experience, the inherent seeing of experience that is the presence of experience that's going on. And then there can seem to be all this other action of participation or not participation, or doing this or not doing that can seem to be going on. And they occur concurrently. So there can seem to be the human being and the personality being caught up in all different sorts of things and liking things and disliking things and having emotional reactivity and so on. There can seem to be all that occurring. And as that may seem to be occurring, it's occurring in the presence of this that is here, the presence of experience itself, which is what it is regardless of what's happening with all of that or not. In other words, you yourself are just an apparition in your experience, just like other people are just apparitions in your experience. So as far as I know, you're just an apparition in my experience. You may or may not exist, but I can't verify that because I only have access to my own experience. And likewise, Peter Brown is an apparition in my experience, just as much as you are. This body appears in my experience. These thoughts, these emotions appear in my experience. But I am the experience itself. I'm not any of these subcategories that I'm imagining or defining as existing within it. So even if Gavin is busy there being Gavin, that's just an apparition within you. Just like me sitting here being me is an apparition within you.
It's like a side job.
Think of it that way, sure.
Yeah.
But it's not a side job because it's not you doing it. I mean, you're doing all of it. You're not any more Gavin than you are this glass of butter.
Tough to swallow that.
Bada boom.
Good one.
Actually, easy. Tough to swallow that. I've always found.
If you're going out and doing, like, let's say, a meditation retreat, you're saying it's easy to get lost in the concept of there is a me and there's a meditating,
Yeah.
instead of seeing what the whole thing really is.
Yeah.
But if you keep, like, sort of one eye on investigating what the whole thing really is, then the meditation can be beneficial.
It's not beneficial or not, it's just a context within which you can do noticing.
But then a temper tantrum can also be a context from which you can do noticing.
Yes.
It's kind of hard to swallow because there seems to be so much traditional, cultural, religion thing around meditation.
Traditional cultural religion thing is a euphemism for conceptual interpretations, which don't exist and which are imaginary. Don't exist in the way that they're defined and are imaginary. This presence right here is not a cultural tradition. And yet anything that can be thought of as a cultural tradition is nothing other than this. And anything that's not a cultural tradition is nothing other than this. So this does not depend upon cultural traditions or not. But cultural traditions or not do depend upon this. If there was no this, where would your cultural traditions be? If there was no TV, where would the TV show be?
TV.
You find yoga changing memory?
I don't know, my memory is not very good. I don't remember if it was better once. I may have thought it was better and I may have been bullshitting myself. Well, think about it. How can a person with a bad memory know if their memory is bad?
It's not going to get better. Probably going to get worse.
Doesn't seem to make any difference though.
Not to me.
Well, speaking of better or worse, this experience, when it seems spacious and when it seems revelatory and enthusiastic, then I feel like, yes, great, this is right.
Mm-hmm.
And then it, when there's a moment of, roaming weirdness, like, what happened? This doesn't seem right.
Mm-hmm.
There is seeing in it, there is that, but it's not happy with itself.
Mm-hmm.
And it wants to do something different
Mm-hmm.
than be in the weird, roaming
Mm-hmm.
uncertainty or grump or whatever it is.
Mm-hmm.
And that uncertainty or grump feels very impersonal. So then it's kind of like, get the fuck out. You have nothing to do with me, but why am I suffering this weirdness?
Mm-hmm.
Yet this thing called does for a minute or whatever, or a day or whatever. So that's my question. Maybe it does go back to what you're saying about, the traditions or whatever. I've heard lots of things about when you get there, you're content 24/7.
Right, okay. I would say that you're content 24/7 is not accurate. I would say you don't stop caring whether or not you're content.
Mm-hmm.
Because you can see the sameness of everything, including the sameness of the not sameness, the sameness of, preferences, the sameness of desire, the sameness of success and failure, the sameness of frustration. Because all those occur, as content, you might say, within experience. But experience itself is the medium that enables the presence of that content. And so typically we identify with the content, we identify with ourselves, our personalities, or our emotional satisfaction, and so on and so forth, as contrasted with identifying with the presence of the experiential field, which is your actual nature. So in realization, you identify with what you are, which doesn't negate or cancel out the personality and the personal functioning, which is also there. And it is identified with too, but not exclusively or not fundamentally. For example, this is my hand. I identify with this hand. When I'm using it, it's my hand and I'm using it. But it's a small subset of me, and this is a small subset of me. So it's present, it's not negated or canceled, and it has my hand has its nature which it enacts. My personality and emotional nature and psychological neuroses have their nature which they enact. But all of that occurs within this actuality that ultimately I am. And ultimately, of course, you are. Ultimately, it's the only thing that exists. So it's a matter of seeing what's the fundamental condition, or what's the root condition that enables everything to occur, and not misidentifying. Human misinterpretation. We're used to identifying the body, mind, say, as the fundamental entity, and so if this is the fundamental entity, then everything else is environment and blah blah blah, all this other stuff. But if you discover the experiential field as a fundamental entity, then that's a drastically different perspective and implication, without changing any of the actual information or any of the actual, let's say, dynamism of the flow of events.
Why is it it's always the negative experiences that take the focus off the body mind and the experiential field? You notice that?
No.
No. You should sometime. I find like if things are going swimmingly, then I'm right there in the body mind, everything's grooving. And then I'm caught up short. Something that goes off or whatever right in front of me. And I feel my whole you know, emotional, nervous system go crazy or whatever, and I'm thinking, oh, I immediately I realized that my happy camper status with my body mind was just fortuitous, didn't have anything to do, and I was focusing on it, I was identifying with it because it felt good. But now it doesn't feel good, so I don't want to identify with that bullshit anymore. So I
Right.
see, well, that's not all there is. There's this whole field.
Right.
It's still got the bullshit.
Yeah.
And it's still strong, but
Yeah.
it's like, I don't want to be stuck with that. So
Right.
I'm going to full field.
This is why it's horrifying having an argument with him, because you're like, solve the argument, and he's like, but love is all there is. That right
You
now.
got me right to God, baby.
Send me to heaven. But again, you're talking about a matter of attention rather than a matter of a fundamental awareness of the condition, which is invariable. So your attention goes to, or you're identifying with the good state, so you're quite happy to stay there and keep that in your focus. And then when there's an annoying state, you want to get out of it, so bang, you shift focus to a more global perspective, perhaps. But the global perspective, you notice when in that one condition is actually present in the other condition as well. So you could notice it if you were so inclined.
Yeah, but I'm wanting to enjoy my humanness and
No, that's great. But
my
again,
identity.
yeah, but again, there's no dichotomy there. You can enjoy your humanness and be thoroughly in the identity, but that doesn't negate the fundamental condition of the global reality that you are. You can't eat it. You get to be God and poor old you at the same time.
So love isn't all there is.
What the fuck? Well, it depends what you define love to be.
It's actually all you need, John.
That's something else.
All there is.
Robert Adams said that some of the transitional states between, like, when you wake up or when you're going to sleep, can be really helpful to do yoga. Is there any validity to this?
I think so. I've said that my own self.
Okay. Why is that?
Because because when everything changes, what doesn't change becomes more apparent. So if you're in the waking state, what there's change and there's not change, but since there's not much contrast, you may not notice the difference. But when you're in the sleep, the entire waking state disappears, and something entirely different becomes more predominant. But in that context, because everything is changing, everything is changing so heavy-handedly, what doesn't change may be more obvious.
I like your explanation better than Robert's. Robert said something along the lines of, when you start to wake up, it takes a while for the mind to move from the heart to the head. And I don't know.
All this.
Yeah.
Don't use the H word, either of them.
And I didn't quite get that.
Oh, how about love?
How about it?
No, you said no.
I love love.
No word is fine.
Love is fine.
But it reminds me, because I was asking about the memory. The other day I woke up and I was trying to journal what I was dreaming, and it was like, I'm using more energy than I'm used to actually remembering something that I usually try to forget, or not try. It's just a deep inhabited habit. But in that moment, it was very clear when I was just waking up. That I'm just making up the belief in this dream.
Right.
That it's not different than that one.
Yeah.
I'm just sort of handing off, taking
Right.
putting down that dream, picking up this one.
Yeah, you're saying, well, that was where I was, now this is where I am.
Yeah. That's why maybe, that's how it felt like that transition period is.
Yeah, yeah, totally.
But I guess I was asking about the memory because my memory is pretty bad too, and I generally don't remember dreams, but now I was kind of putting the effort to try to do it, and it's doable. It just seems like a habit where I've conditioned myself to forget the dreams and believe this dream.
Exactly.
Would you say knowing that you're dreaming is the same as seeing?
Yes. And if you know you're dreaming now, that's what seeing looks like.
So sometimes when I'm hearing steering, I'm like I'm trying to look for something.
Sounded like what you were saying earlier, that there's just verbing, but then the mind tries to do some noun differentiation, which is the problem. So you basically just need to see that everything is just verbing.
Yes.
There's no nouns,
There's no nouns and there's only one verb.
which is seeing.
Which is, well, sure, ising, experiencing, seeing, whatever you want to call it. Doesn't matter what you call it, it's what it is. And you could say there's only one noun too, but the noun and the verb are actually refer to the same thing. Because what this is not a thing, and what this is not an action, and yet all actions are nothing other than it, and all things are nothing other than it. So it obviously can be taken as thingness, and obviously can be taken as actionness. But it's something that is itself, and beyond simply being either of those or both of those. And you can see that perhaps more clearly if you think of a dream. In a dream, there's no things, there's nothing present. You wake up and it's not like the crew rushes out to put away the props. There's nothing there to put away, and yet it seems like there is. And likewise, in a dream, there's no actions, since all the interactions of the seeming elements of the dream, since the elements were there was no actual interactions of them. So the only action there was the dreaming itself, which was the things and was the seeming events involving the things, which was actually neither things nor event, but this condition, this fundamental weirdness we call dreaming. And likewise, you can call this experiencing, which we can say is the waking equivalent of dreaming, but it doesn't matter what word you use. They're both the same thing.
That's great. That's really clear.
Good.
Do you think George really was the spiritual leader?
He was a Pisces man. He was a Pisces of the group. Says it all. We all know who the spiritual leader was. Of course. Mr. Don't Worry, Be Happy himself.
Eddie McCurry?
You listen to Beatles?
Oh, what's the difference between focus and like daydreaming or wandering mind or confusion?
Well, they're not, focus is what makes those others seem to appear, or seem to become predominant. All conditions are always simultaneously present. Right at this moment, you're awake, you're asleep, you're dreaming, and so on and so forth. If your focus shifts away from, or let's say relatively away from your sensory information and shifts into your fantasy life right now, you may seem to be daydreaming. But it's not like something new is happening, your focus of attention is drifting. Which is how hypnosis works.
The daydreaming is itself its own kind of focus in a sense,
Of
because
course.
it's appearing as daydreaming.
Yeah, the focus of awareness shifts to that sort of strata of consciousness where that quality of event is occurring. But if you want to meditate, it's not like you start meditating, but the focus of attention shifts to the strata of consciousness, which is what you would describe as being meditation. Not that there are actual strata and so on and so forth, but that's a way of putting it.
The real meditation is just the appearance of it.
Yeah.
Why do you think there's so few people that really get to see this at a deep level? Even though it's so obvious in some ways.
It's a mystery. I have no idea. I mean, I think partially it has to do with human culture. Human said to exist in a dark age where this information is just not present very purely to any degree at all. So people just aren't even exposed to the possibility. So even though it may be relatively easy to do, and even though many people may be able to do it, they don't even know it's a possibility because they haven't been exposed to that information. Because they're so bombarded with other information involving identification with partialities and concepts. So it may simply be a matter of you know, a barrage of misinformation, people drowning in misinformation. I don't know. That's one theory.
I think if more people knew or saw what we're speaking of, then the play would kind of end. Like, this world we live in would maybe stop operating and really be it. I mean, it may just be like a different form of manifesting actions moving from something else driving it versus this kind of illusory type of conceptual way of living.
Yeah, things may change, and they may change fundamentally, or maybe not so much, who knows? It would be an interesting experiment to see. My experience of people who have deep realization is they aren't all that different from who they were before they had deep realization in terms of their functioning. You know, just my, you know, just the way it seems to be, just as a generalization, but who knows?
Is it like, my understanding is like the deepest realization is something that's extremely ordinary.
Yes,
The
exactly.
most ordinary thing
Yes,
ever.
yes.
So if you're experiencing anything fantastical, that's probably not it. Like seeing spiritual beings.
It's not that it's not it. It's that it's a partiality, whereas is a totality. Realization is seeing what this has always been. So exactly what your experience has always seemed to be is what you discover it is when you have realization. So it's not a change of experience or a change of condition. It's the recognition of what has always been. So people who see angelic beings and such may well have been seeing them before they were realized.
But
Or you may develop a more subtle understanding of what constitutes an angelic being.
but for yourself, if you were to like engage in some hypothetical comparison before and after, like nothing had changed, but you just saw this most obvious fact that seemed hidden before.
Yes. But it wasn't that it was hidden. It was I didn't recognize it as anything at all. It had no significance whatsoever. What I thought was significant turns out to be insignificant, and what I thought was insignificant turns out to be the primal significance. Everything's basically completely backwards, completely upside down. What humans think is important has no importance whatsoever, and what humans think has no importance is what's supremely important. Everyone thinks what happens is what's important. What happens is irrelevant entirely. And everyone thinks the presence of experience is trivial and a non-entity, whereas the presence of experience is the entirety of what's happening, is where meaningfulness and fulfillment and all value and all freedom and all joy is to be found.
Ordinariness.
Yeah, of course, ordinary. It is perfectly ordinary because it's always been, but it's always been just the presence of experience.
So it's like the context is more important than the content.
Yes.
Kind of.
Yeah, we just put it that way.
And that's all for tonight, folks.
No, actually, we have 10 more minutes.
What are we gonna say now?
I don't know.
Just gave us the answer in the back of the book.
I've been giving you guys the answer all night.
All right. Say it again.
Yeah. Unfortunately, it's not about the answers, it's about doing the math. You can have your math text and you can look at it in the back and see all the answers, but unless you know yourself how to derive them, they don't do you any good. So it's very easy to say what reality is like and what realization is like. The important thing is to see for yourself. That's what makes it powerful and actual for you. Besides, your version of realization won't exactly agree with anyone else's version of realization anyway.
Oh, it's not the same answer that everybody comes to.
It's the same answer, but the way you put it will be different. When you become realized, you can understand completely what was wrong about everything you were told. Everything. So if you work with a deeply realized spiritual teacher, when you start getting realization, you'll be able to criticize. You'll be able to see the way everything they say is wrong. Because you'll see what's right. But you'll see your version of it.
And you'll be able to say it better.
Well, you'll think you're saying it better. I won't.
Well, it's like the audience says, like, the best I can hope is to fail in a good way.
Well, ultimately, spiritual teaching is not about conveying information. It's about enabling discovery. So it may look like an exchange of information or a conveying of information, but that's not what it's really about. It's about enabling discovery. And if conveying misinformation enables discovery, then that's perfectly effective spiritual teaching. Truth cannot actually be said. So by definition, everything that's being said is untrue, is inaccurate. And when you see what's true clearly, then you see the way in which that's so.
But what you're seeing is consistent between everybody who's sort of seen it, right?
Of course, there's only one reality.
Yeah. But what you end up
But since it's
discovering,
unresolvable, it is what it is, but it's not any one thing. It has no final condition. So you could say, in a very profound sense, you could say the deepest, most ultimate truth is that there is no deepest ultimate truth. But that is the deepest, most ultimate truth. For example. So you could say very, very clearly that realization is the full and self-evident and self-verifying realization of the fact that there's no such thing as realization.
then how do you know whether you've gotten there or not?
Because you know for a fact that there is no realization. You know for a fact, self-verifying, so you're there.
I was just about to say that, although not like that.
Right, better. mean, another way to look at it is you've never really known what anything is. And you know you've never really known what anything is, even though you've developed a lot of proficiency of being able to fake it and bullshit. And so owning that fact that you don't know what anything is realization when you see quite clearly that you can't know what anything is. When you can't know what anything is, the fact that you don't know what anything is actuality. That's the end of the road.
So when Socrates said the only thing you can know is that you know nothing, do you think he was realized?
Of course, you're Socrates, come on.
Okay.
We're not talking Joe Schmo here, we're talking fucking Socrates.
That's probably why they hung him.
They hung it?
No.
Poison.
Oh, is that how it, okay. I
Hemlock,
know he got killed somehow.
just past the hemlock. The ultimate truth can be said to be unresolvability. And unresolvability means you can't find the ultimate truth. But since you can't find the ultimate truth is the ultimate truth, when you find that you can't find the ultimate truth, you found the ultimate truth. And that's not just a word game, although it's a pretty good word game.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like my mind isn't going to get this.
No,
It has to be seen.
yes,
Okay.
You are singing.
yes. You are, you
I haven't got it wrong, you got it.
That's great.
Is that the same thing as saying the one that's trying to claim realization doesn't even exist as a fixed?
It's analogous, but it's not, I would say it's the same thing. That's a false realization of identification, not the true realization that identification is arbitrary.
That's part again?
I said that's the false identification of realization, not the true realization that identification is arbitrary. In other words, since you can't know what anything is, you can hold anything to be anyway, and there's no hierarchy of better or worse of any different way you do it. So you can identify with the body mind, you can identify with the field, you can identify with, the Republican Party, you can identify with anything you want, and there's no more right or wrong than anything else. So when you see that this is no particular way, any way you take it to be is fine. It's just a convenience. It's not falser than any other way of taking it.
But to a large extent, it seems there's no choice in it. It's just whatever your karma is, whatever you believe in is what you believe in.
Sure, you can see it that way.
I'm saying even if you see that there's,
No, I understand.
it's arbitrary, at the end of the day, you're still with a certain.
Sure,
It doesn't matter.
doesn't
It
matter.
doesn't matter.
Yeah.
Doesn't have an effect. It's a wrap.
It's a wrap.
And on that note.
Thanks, Peter.
Okay.